before I introduce tonight's speaker, to mention about what is coming up next month. On October 3rd, we will sit down and break bread together, or chicken. For Sequoia Genealogical Society members, we will be holding our annual potluck luncheon. Once again, hosted by my wife Sharon and myself. Hopefully it'll be cool enough that we can hold it outside on our pool deck. And by the way, when I say pool deck, I mean that quite literally. Our pool has been filled in with dirt and we built a deck over it. So
it's a pool deck.
That's where it will be. We will have a map in the October newsletter on how to find it. And if you are planning to attend, we hope that you'll let us know a little bit in advance so that we can make sure that we have enough barbecue chicken for you. And the rest will be potluck, so we will find out what's happening and what we'll have. As far as an after meeting refreshment tonight, I signed up for it. I signed up for it because
it's his birthday.
Today I became an antique.
I'm an antique too.
I hit 75 today. So
I'm 85. Monday.
Okay.
Give me up 2
So
birthdays.
Rosie will be 85 on Monday, but she didn't bring any after, did she? Our speaker tonight likely doesn't need a formal introduction, as he has been a long time, I didn't say old member or long, I said a long time genealogy member and speaker when he can fit us into his schedule. Terry Ommen began his career in law enforcement as an MP in the U.S. Army in the mid-60s. He has a bachelor's degree from Long Beach State University, a master's from Chapman University, and has graduated the California Police Command College and the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. In 1972, Terry joined the Visalia Police Department, from which he retired after 25 years of service in 1997. To say that Terry is a fan of local history would be a gross understatement. He is a published author of at least 4 books about Tulare County's history, and he has written and continues to write newspaper and magazine articles, along with columns and an online blog. So at least that's what he used to. Do you still do the blog once in a while?
I have not, but it's still active and it's still online. I just don't keep it up.
So to bring us up to date, please join with me in welcoming Terry Ommen.
Now, according to this gauge, this should be working.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Let me put this in my pocket so I don't get tangled up here, which is easy for me to do. Thank you, as always, for inviting me. I love to talk to groups, and especially groups that have an interest in history. I've talked to other groups and I've seen many, many eyelids. And so I know that my topic is not necessarily for everyone, but I try and make our history kind of come alive and be exciting, because for me it is. And if I can share that with people, that maybe we can hook more people on local history. As many of you know, as a former retired police officer, my focus on history tends to be on the law and order side. The outlaws and the lawmen of the Old West, and especially of Tulare County. To some, that's kind of a sickness. Why would you focus on sort of the underbelly of Tulare County? Well, I don't know why I do it. It's because I enjoy doing it, and you can kind of see based on the picture there that I'm a sort of a shoot 'em up kind of a history guy. And by the way, I did that artwork.
Wow.
I did it by using AI. And that is amazing. I've got a software program, and I told my son-in-law I was not going to give him credit for it, but he gave me the app which allowed me to do this. But it is so amazing. This could put artists out of work, could put writers out of work, and for that I'm not very proud, but at the same time, that's some pretty spectacular art right there. And again, I wanted to share that with you because I didn't want you to think that I actually drew that or painted it. I did not. How many here have heard of George Victor Reed before tonight? Rosie has. I learned about him many years ago and created a file on him because he really piqued my interest. He was a deputy sheriff. He went on to be a banker in Lindsay and then had an unfortunate end. But I focused my energy on him and his 4 years of law enforcement career. 4 years of law enforcement with the Tulare County Sheriff's Department. I should stick to my notes here so I can keep these slides in sync. Okay. This is my first entry into my file on George Victor Reed. I got this photo someplace. It's a terrible photo. It's glary, it's fuzzy, but it's clear enough where you can see at the top it says George Victor Reed. And I thought, you know what? That's the George Victor Reed that I created the file on, the lawman. There's his badge. Right there. I don't know where I got the picture, but it went in the file. And I thought, you know, I'll fill in the pieces as I go here, which I do with a lot of my files. And so that was the first entry in my file on him, and I thought, you know what? If you look carefully, you can see Deputy Sheriff, Tulare County, California, if it was a little clearer, but that was his badge. So I thought, you know, one day at some point I might actually discover that badge and be able to add a nice picture of that badge. And never knowing whether I was really going to be able to do it. And so he became sort of one of those many files that I have in my 40 file drawers of historical records. I'm a paper guy too, by the way. Not a lot of online stuff, but I'm a paper guy. And so our county really taught the course on train robbery. People would come here to learn how to rob trains because we were so good at it. A Salvation Army worker came to Tulare County in 1896 and wrote in the War Cry magazine, which is a Salvation Army magazine. He said in his magazine, "Country of train robbers, Visalia, we landed all safe in the country of train robbery and where the devil does so much shooting." And that was his description of his new assignment in Tulare County. So by this time, it was 1896, we had gone through so many train robberies. We had Sontag and Evans, we had the Daltons, and we really what do you call that when you reach a certain level of expertise? We did that with train robbery with explosives. We love to explode express cars and mail cars. And so other places in the country would copy us because of our experience in that area. And in fact, Sheriff Cunningham in Stockton, and this is 1897, he said, it says, it was Sheriff Cunningham of Stockton who once said that if a train was held up or a stage robbed, he would at once telegraph to the sheriff of this county, which is Tulare County, to ascertain if any of our good citizens were missing from their accustomed haunts. Tulare County has been the home of a number of desperados who have done their utmost to give the county a hard name. And so there's no question about 1890s and probably for a decade from about 1889 with the Daltons and Chris Evans and Sontag, we were known as a train robbery county. No question about it. We had that reputation. And what does that have to do with George Victor Reed? Well, one of his assignments when he was a deputy sheriff here, and he was deputy sheriff in Tulare County from 1894 to 1898. Excuse me, he came from Ohio as a young man with no police experience, and the sheriff of Tulare County was from Ohio, and so was Reed, and so they struck up a friendship, and he got hired as a deputy sheriff. And so that's... Now, why did they rob trains? Well, they robbed them not for the fun of it, although you might think they did it that way, but they did it for the money. And they didn't necessarily do it for the money of the passengers in the train. They did it for the money in the express car or the mail car, which was on the train. And so that's kind of a semblance there of what a mail car looked like. Wells Fargo bags would be stored in there and transported, so it was an easy target in a lot of ways. So, this is a typical, this was not the train that I'm going to be talking about, but this is typical of a train in that period of time, the 1890s. You'll see there that, of course, the locomotive, the tender, and he's sitting on wood or coal, I'm not sure which. And what they do with that car is they would take the material in that car and put it into the steam engine, create the fire to cause the steam and created the motion. And then behind that were rail cars. Express car was somewhere down here, and then of course there was a caboose back in here. But this was critical. It's either wood, some kind of fuel, or coal. The man on the right is George Victor Reed. He is the focus of my talk tonight. Looks like a young kid to me. The older I get, the younger these people look. But he's about 29 years old there. Was born in 1867 in Ohio, a little town called Chester, Ohio. Came to California in 1889 and settled in the Orosi area. And as I mentioned earlier, the sheriff, also from Ohio, decided they needed to hire a deputy. And so he was a good Ohio boy, so let's hire him. So in 1894, 1894, Victor Reed, he went by Vic Reed. Yeah. Merritt is the sheriff at the time of Tulare County in this particular episode we're talking about, 1895. And you'll see up here, the two deputies were D.O. Harrelson and George Victor Reed. The undersheriff was Daggett, Earl Daggett, and Alfred Merritt, of course, was the sheriff. This is Alfred Daggett right here, a little bit older than Reed, but these two were together on the episode that I'm going to be talking about in just a second. In March of 1896, there was a man who worked in a farm as a lumber woodcutter, wood chopper, and his name was Dan McCall. Dan McCall thought wood chopping took a lot of effort and didn't really want to expend that kind of energy to make a living. So he mentioned to his friend, also a woodcutter named O.B. Britt, and that's O-B-I-E, and then last word Britt, B-R-I-T-T. So they hung around chopping wood together, and McCall said to him, look, there's a better way to make a living than this. This is hard work. How about robbing a train? And so O.B. Britt, a young guy, well-to-do family from Texas, said, you're not serious, are you? He said, yeah, I'm serious. He said, why don't you participate with me? And he said, nah, I don't really want to, but tell me more about what you're talking about. So they talked more about it. McCall came up with this plan, and they were going to go on a railroad car, Southern Pacific Railroad car in Goshen, that was heading south toward Tulare from Goshen. And the reason they decided to do that is because they felt they could do it without having any interference from lawmen. Well, what McCall didn't realize is that Britt went south on him and said, I'm not having anything to do with this. I'm going to talk to the authorities, namely Sheriff Merritt. So quietly and without telling McCall, Britt went to the sheriff and said, hey, he's going to rob that train. So what did Merritt do? He called on Daggett and Reed and said, you guys are going to stake out that train because they're going to rob it, and we want to be there when they rob it so you can take action. So, and a little bit of personal experience here. When you're on a stakeout, it's kind of boring, but at the same time, knowing if you've got good information, that chances are pretty good something's going to happen. And so you got your guard really up, because this is not just a possibility, this is a probability that it's going to happen. That's the way it was with these guys who went on the train and sat. You see where that guy's sitting right there? They were hunkered down in that coal car, waiting for McCall to board that train and to take over the engine. So they were just sitting there waiting for McCall to somehow get on that train and get that train to stop. And these are the two that were on that train. That's McCall. McCall did not do well in his robbery attempt. He came up behind the officers, they didn't see him, and said, put your hands up. And they turned, and then the gunfire took place. Huge gunfight. Shotguns, rifles, pistols, everybody's shooting. This is McCall after the shootout is over. He is dead there. And that's the only known photo I have of him. I don't have any pre-shootout photos. And I even went to Santa Cruz, where he came from, to look for a photo. I couldn't find one. But this is a guy that was killed. He was shot by these two lawmen who were also wounded. Reed was shot in the shoulder, and Daggett was shot in the chest. Both of them were seriously injured, but Daggett was much more serious than Reed. The shots to this guy knocked him off the train, and Daggett couldn't talk, but Reed could, and he told the engineer, forget about his body, let's head to Tulare to get him to the hospital or to a doctor. And that's what they did. They later came back to pick up his body along the tracks. That was a big deal in his 4-year career. And it may come back to haunt him. I don't know this. But I'll get to that when we get to the end of my speech here tonight. O.B. Britt implicated 2 more people in the robbery attempt. A guy named Josiah Lovren and another guy named Charles Ardell. Both of them were tough guys. Cy Lovren owned the Lovren Saloon in Visalia, and it was the worst, absolute worst hangout you could ever go into. Just terrible. And so he implicated both of them as part of the robbery of the train, that they had supplied something to help in the robbery of that train. Both of them were arrested. Now keep in mind, McCall is dead now. He's out of the picture, no trial necessary there. But we still have 2 now. We got these Confederates or accomplices, Lovren and Ardell. And this is where their court case was carried out. And that's the Tulare County Courthouse, as you probably recognize. That would have been in 1896 how it looked. These are the tagline in the newspaper, and this actually came from the San Francisco newspaper. They covered the whole thing. And you'll see weapons owned by Cy Lovren, and those are the bullets that were used to shoot Daggett and Reed. So these guys went to court. Ardell was found not guilty. Cy Lovren was convicted because he supplied the guns that McCall had. So Cy Lovren, who well, I'll show you in a second here. That's a jail. That's a jail where Cy Lovren was kept, and Ardell spent time there too, just not for this particular crime. When Ardell and Lovren were in jail waiting their trial, they got very nervous. They weren't so tough at the time, because they heard that there was a mob gathering to break them out of jail and lynch them. And you can see right there, they had heard that a mob was gathering. No mob ever came. That's Ardell, found not guilty on this crime, but was found guilty on many other crimes. And this is what he looked like in his prison garb when he committed a crime in Fresno. But that's Ardell. Charles L. Ardell escaped prosecution on this particular case. This is the only good photo I have of Lovren's saloon. They call it Lovren's space here, but look, this came out of the San Francisco Call newspaper. This is Cy Lovren right here. And this are all the hangers-on there at the saloon that were all troublemakers. Everybody there was a troublemaker. It really, honestly, it's not exaggerated. It was just that kind of a place. And when Cy Lovren got convicted in court, this is what the newspaper had to say: a life term. And then it says, the roll of honor. Following are the names of the members of the jury who convicted Josiah Lovren. They call them the honor roll because of the good deed they did by convicting him. And there's Cy Lovren. This is in his jail stripes. Tough guy, very tough guy, ran a terrible place. Now, that's a story, a quick synopsis of that train robbery. McCall was killed, Lovren was sentenced to life in prison. Reed came out of his wounds in fine condition, shoulder injury, not a big problem. Actually, Daggett came out okay too. He survived, and he came out in good shape. Now, the other part of this story, and it's one of the things that I love about what we do, because there are all sorts of discoveries that pop up. And if you're genealogists, you get discoveries, unexpected discoveries sometimes quite often. And they really are aha moments. They solve a puzzle. They do all those things that make that job worthwhile for you. I'm going to leave George Reed and his law enforcement. Served only 4 years for the Tulare County Sheriff's Department. That train robbery was his biggest event. It was a biggie. Reported all over the state for sure, and even outside of California. He left in 1899, or 98, excuse me, and was hired, I believe, the assessor of Tulare County. So he had some political ambitions as well. And so he served there until 1920s. No, I take that back, till early 1900s, and then was picked to open the Lindsay National Bank, the first bank to open in Lindsay. So he was called upon to do that. So he had a business mind as well. And so he went to Lindsay and was the vice president and the manager of the bank there, and was very well respected Lindsay citizen. And in 1923, he surprised everyone. He stuck a gas nozzle from an appliance in his house into his mouth and committed suicide. Now, a lot of people at the time said there must have been some hanky-panky going on at the bank. That's why he wanted to commit suicide. No such thing. Records were as good as could be. He must have been having marital problems with his wife. No. Very, very good family life. The reason for his suicide, in his note, was the stress of his job at the bank. And I'm not sure what the stressors at a bank might be, but I'm not a banker, so I don't know. Maybe there are lots of stressors there. But that was his reason that he committed suicide, and that was 1923. 56 years old when he died. And this is what he looked like at the time of his death. That's George Reed right there, George Victor Reed. Now, getting back to the discovery thing I just mentioned to you, I was either out or in my home, I'm not sure which, and I got a text on my phone. And it was from a friend of mine who's the archivist at the Porterville Museum. His name is Jay Farb. Anybody know Jay? Jay and I have similar interests in the law and order history. He was a correctional officer, so we kind of have similar interests as far as history goes. He sent me this picture. I said, wait a minute. That's the picture that I have in my file that's fuzzy and blurry. He didn't know George Victor Reed. He just sent it to me because he knew I liked law enforcement history of Tulare County. I couldn't get onto my phone quick enough and say, what is that? Where did you get that? He said, it was a badge laying around in our files, and I thought I'd share it with you. I said, do you know George Victor Reed? He said, I have no clue who he is. Well, here he is. His family, when he committed suicide, donated his father's, in this case the son donated, his father's material, including the badge. And not only the badge, he sent me a picture of this, which is called a pocket register, and it's dated 1887. And I'll get to in a second what that's all about. That is Reed's little pocket book that he carried when during his 4 years as deputy sheriff. And that was his mug file of some of the folks that he had to deal with in sort of a negative way. And so I'm going to show you in just a couple seconds here. That's not a very good one right there, but that's Walter Talmadge. I have never seen a picture of Walter Talmadge. I have a file on Walter Talmadge, probably a ½ inch thick. Always hunting for a picture of this guy who did so many bad things in Tulare County. And he had a picture of Walter Talmadge in that little book. And that was just one of many. And so, I mean, it was a treasure trove, but out of the blue, I get all this interesting stuff that sort of helps me with putting a better file together. There's Cy Lovren. I've never seen this picture of Cy Lovren. It was in his book. Now, he looks like a grandfatherly guy, doesn't he? Oh my gosh. I would have loved to have met this guy. Really. Seriously. I wouldn't want to spend much time alone with him. But I would love to have met him just to know that guy. In fact, he was so bad for me that I included a chapter on Josiah Lovren in my Wild Tulare County book. But if I would have had this photo, it would have been in the book. But that's Cy Lovren. That is Ben Johnson. The Johnson brothers lived in Traver and were notorious bad folks in Tulare County. He doesn't look like it, though, does he? But he and his brother, the Johnson boys, and this is Ben of the two brothers, was just terrible. And he was in the book as well. Never seen a picture of him either. One of my favorites is Parker Anderson. I get confused. A friend of mine wrote the book, The Story of a Hanged Man. It's the story of this guy right here. He was hanged in Prescott, Arizona. And the author is Parker Anderson, and the crook up there is Fleming Parker. So it gets kind of confusing. This is Fleming Parker, also known as William Parker. He was a bad guy on a minor scale in Tulare County. Then went to Arizona and committed a murder in Prescott. And there he was hanged. And here's a picture of the hanging of this man right in the gallows there at Prescott, Arizona. But this booklet gives all sorts of little tidbits about the characters that are photoed in there, which is, you're never going to find it anywhere else. I mean, this is new stuff. And for me, when you can add that kind of knowledge to your understanding, you know, and here it was hidden in that museum. And no one ever inventoried, I mean, it was just in there. But no one knew the characters, and so it was just some more stuff, you know. But anyway, that was my discovery, and Jay Farb got just as excited as I did once I told him all the stories about it, and that's my story. So do you have any questions about these guys? Or about anything to do with this story?
Where was the Loveland's place in Visalia?
Do you know where the old Visalia Theater is at Garden and Main?
Yeah,
Right there.
right there.
Right on the theater lot. He had a little brothel made out of brick in the back of it. And it was right there. And that's, when I do lots of walking tours in Visalia, that's always on my list to tell people about. But yeah, that was Rubber and Saloon right there. And there's just, you could write a book on the stuff that happened at that saloon right there. Any other questions?
Have you been to our museum?
Oh, many times.
Well, they're having Don LeBaron in there tonight and showing all his pictures, so you might want to swing by.
Oh my gosh.
Because he's got the heritage pictures on one wall.
Oh my
Really
gosh,
interesting.
I never heard that. I guess I'm not on their mailing list
I
or
guess
something.
not, but anyway, it's still going on. I don't know when they were gonna wrap it up.
Well,
They were
tonight's
having
just the
such a
opening
good
reception.
time.
Yeah.
So it's just starting.
Yeah, Don is a heck of a photographer. He worked for the Advance Register for a long time. I think.
Yeah,
When it was award-winning
Yeah, he's a
things.
good guy. I've known him.
yeah, he talked about Tom Hennion and a couple of photographers were there that worked with him.
Oh.
Hannah, is that her
Tim
name?
Miller was there.
Oh, Tim was there?
there.
Yeah.
Say that name again?
Tim Miller,
Oh, I don't know him.
he just worked at the.
Advance Register though?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was her name Hannah, the girl?
I don't remember her name.
Oh, well, she was there also, from the Advance Register.
Yeah, yeah.
Might be Judy Fernandez. Was it?
Yes, ma'am.
Did they just have one son or did
He had two sons. Yeah, they both were very successful business people. Were heads of canneries and businesses in the valley, and yeah, they were all successful. Yeah, he was smart family. But you know, in those days, you didn't come into law enforcement with an academy training behind you. There was no academy. You just,
You were a rookie.
huh?
You were a rookie.
You were a rookie and your training was on the job. Fortunately, Reed and Daggett didn't face what they faced here their first year. They had a little bit of seasoning time. But it was shortly after Reed was on the force for a year is when that incident happened. And that was, oh, and I was going to say, you know, one of my theories, and I'm certainly not a psychologist, but you know, when you look at the motivation for somebody for committing suicide, I kept thinking, you know, PTSD with that incident, you never really know if there was something going on there that might have just made him depressed. He might have been depressed his entire life, but no one could connect it to anything like they do now, you know. And I keep thinking, you know, that was such a traumatic incident, that shootout on that train, and getting hit and seeing your partner you thought was dead, and you know, the outlaw falling off the train onto the tracks and you're racing to Tulare. I mean, that was pretty traumatic incident right there. And I just wondered to myself, could he have been having some repercussions from that incident in the form of PTSD? I don't know. You know,
What's your background? How, you said you didn't have that formal training, so how did you get into law enforcement?
oh no, I had formal training.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh no, they wouldn't let me sneak in without formal training. I even passed the psychological path,
Well, I believe
which I'm surprised.
and you haven't failed.
No, I actually survived 25 years, and yeah, I mean that was pretty brutal, and you didn't have the backups that people have now. You know, you have an incident, I mean, if we're gonna do a stakeout, now we've got SWAT standing by, we've got an ambulance 2 blocks away, we've got, you know, reinforcements over there.
And kids
Yeah.
in school.
Huh?
And kids in school.
Right, yeah. But I mean, they're by themselves. I mean, you saw the list of the sheriff's department. They had 2 deputies, the undersheriff and the sheriff. That was the sheriff's department. And so, I mean, you call on citizens to help you if you can, but other than that, you're on your own. Yes, ma'am?
Well, since it said pressures of banking, I was wondering what was the economic environment, because banks.
Well, it was
are going-
1923. It wasn't during the Depression where people were losing their farms or, I don't know. I mean, I think people were scratching their head, trying to figure it out because, but I mean, he gave the reason. It's just, it was hard to understand the reason. You know, people didn't look at a banker as being in a very stressful kind of position. I don't know. I've never been a banking. They'd never allow me in banks.
My father was an accountant, and we spent 3 days trying to find 3 cents.
You say that one more time?
We spent 3 days trying to find 3 cents. My father didn't have any miscellaneous. He had to have all the money accounted for.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was a bit of a,
It's probably stressful, huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
people running numbers and numbers and numbers.
Oh, yeah, trying to get to a balance.
It was a displacement because it was 3 cents. That meant that the numbers were transferred. So we ran 125 numbers that were identical, and then we got a number that was transferred, and there was another 76 numbers after that. So that were the same as the original numbers. And because of the time it took, you went right by the one that was wrong
Oh,
because the mind
sure.
didn't see it. Took us 3 days.
But even all the bank officials said books were complete and in order. So, I mean, you think, well, maybe he was cooking the books or something, but it sure doesn't sound like it. It sounds like he was just facing some tough things going on up here, I guess. Yes, ma'am?
You said you do walking tours?
Huh?
Do you still?
I do them all the time.
Where at?
I do Visalia walking tours,
Uh-huh, okay.
and I do them, I mean, I probably do 20, not a month, but 20 every 6 months, probably. Yeah, I mean, that's, and obviously, I tell them beforehand, look, you're gonna get the seedy side of Visalia when you go on my tours. I am gonna give you the seedy side. If you don't want that, find another tour guide. Because I show them where the brothels are, I show them where all the shootouts took place, the vigilante hangings, all of that. I mean, I know it's a disease, I know it's sick, but
That's
what can
what
I
people
do?
want to see.
Huh?
That's what people want to see.
That's sick too, Pat. I know.
Do you ever branch out? The Butterfield Overland State?
Oh my gosh, yes. I've got so many interesting, topics that pique my interest. The Butterfield is one of them. You hit it right on the head.
They've got 3 different locations downtown, right? The depot and where they held the horses.
Oh no, there's only one Butterfield stage stop in Visalia, and that's right in front of basically the Palace Hotel on Main Street by Court.
Okay.
But yeah, but Tulare County was right in the middle of that 2,300 mile Butterfield Overland Mail route.
Wow.
And I mean, they'd come out of the Fort Tejon area with the stage, hit the valley floor, and there were like 30 stage stops before they got to the Pacheco Pass. And that was all Tulare County in 1858, except for the northern part, because Fresno already came to being in 1956. But There was no Kern County in 1958 when that stage came through. Yeah, 18. Did I say 19? Sorry. I get my centuries mixed up. Anyway, thank you folks for your attention. I appreciate it very much.